Well, I'm going to start off. Obviously, my name is Tony Sutphin. I consider myself an expert on financial aid. I've gone from the days when we used to have to hand calculate each student manually by having a folder and looking at their taxes and having to create forms across the board for each family. Uh, for this year, for example, we had 22,000 freshmen apply to George Washington. So we had to come up with 22,000 financial aid packages. If anyone heard anything about this past year with FAFSA, last year was a disaster. That is the nicest thing I can say about it. They tried to change the FAFSA, and in doing so, they made a mess. Um, the director of the Department of Education that did the FAFSA resigned. Currently, there's no one at the department level now handling this particular thing and going through. Luckily, by being in DC, I was sharing that I get to walk up the street to Capitol Hill. And they do invite schools up there to have a say so. So I'm always in the front row asking questions about what did you change the number in college? Because until you can convince me, I can't convince all my parents that that was the smartest change in the world on the FAFSA. To let you know, the FAFSA was supposed to be ready on October 1st of this year. It is now December 1st. What does that mean? It means that they are testing with some schools. I talked to one of the schools in Iowa yesterday, and those it's been going fine. But December 1st, because remember last year, anyone that had to deal with that, especially high school counselors, it was December, then it was October, December, then it was February, then it was March, then it was May, then it was June, and we got financial aid packages to our students 2 weeks before the beginning of fall semester. That's not going to happen this year because I said if I have to hand calculate students again, I will. I'm going to go over the basics of a high school presentation. I definitely want to talk a lot about the CSS profile because I am an expert on that form and why people need to have that form. And talk to you what the use is for. And also one of my titles at the school is I manage an $18 million undergraduate scholarship form. So I'm the undergraduate scholarship manager. So I can tell you the secrets about scholarships and where I pull my information from, which is why you'll want to know why the FAFSA and the CSS is needed. So anyway, welcome. And like I said, to Indian Spring Schools, Altamont Schools, and Alabama School of Fine Arts. So those are the colleges that I understood were going to be here today. So um, basics about financial aid. What is financial aid? Many families say this is silly, but I need you to know that it concerns grants, which are free money that you don't pay back. It concerns scholarships, which is also free money. It includes student and parent loans, which is part of a financial aid package. And one of my favorites is it includes work study. And I'll talk to you about what work study is in a moment. But work studies, which allows the students to work on campus. And what I tell my students at George Washington, those students that get work study, it allows them to get to know the teachers who give out scholarships, who give out fellowships, and who give out assistantships to help students in their undergraduate and graduate programs. So work study allows you to get into the program to get to know the professors and the teachers. It actually pays it from the federal government. Federal government pays the employment of a work study student. I tell many new freshmen, don't do work study your first semester because obviously there's so much going on with moving and being on your own that you should be looking at work study your spring semester. For an opportunity to get out and get into the community and do the things that are important for the family. What is financial need? It's the cost of attendance at the school minus the student aid index. This used to say expected family contribution. And many families, when they would see the word zero, they said, oh, I don't owe anything. And that's not true. This student aid index, which they changed this year, helps us determine what kind of financial aid category that the family can fall into minus outside resources, because a lot of students are coming in with lots of outside resources from other things, equals the student financial need across the board. So that's the basic breakdown of what it is. Each school, if you apply to 5 schools, you're going to have 5 different costs of attendance. Just to share an example, for a private school like George Washington, the cost of attendance this year is $92,837. I could not have afforded to go to school here. It's too expensive. And it's also because we're in the city, everything like housing and room and board is a lot more expensive because of the location of the school. So the cost of attendance is a budget that's derived by the financial aid office each year. It looks at things like your tuition and fees, your room and meal plan. Now, for new freshmen, that's room and meal plan on campus. For some schools, that also includes in your sophomore and junior and senior years, it includes room and board off campus if you're approved for that. Books and supplies for your particular major, personal and miscellaneous expenses, and transportation allowance. And I'll give you an example. We have students that come from California to George Washington. They're not living in Maryland or DC, so therefore it's not a quick commute for them. It's a 4-hour plane flight. So those students will actually say my transportation budget needs to be larger because I'm flying from California to Virginia for breaks as well as at the end of each semester. So we allow students to appeal the costs that are about. We do a survey of students, as many schools do, and that's how we come up with personal cost, miscellaneous costs, and travel costs. But we allow the family to say our travel cost is more than what you have because we have, for example, coming from Alabama and we're traveling to George Washington and we're driving. It costs more than the person that's driving from Virginia an hour away. So we allowed you to look and build your transportation cost at the individual school you're going to. To be eligible, a student has to be degree seeking. We do have a lot of these days, a lot of students that are in programs just taking classes. If you are just taking classes and you're not seeking a degree, zero financial aid. There is no funding at our school and at many schools because you must be seeking a degree. Number two, you have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. At our school, we evaluate international students and they have to be able to prove that they can pay for international. We probably have 30% of our undergraduate population is international students. And that is also because of where we are in the city. Lots of people come to DC because they're studying business or finance. Returning students have to look at a thing called satisfactory progress. Freshmen don't, but I wanted to tell you the biggest things to remember. If you win any scholarships or grants, you have to keep a 2.0 overall. A 2.0 C average overall is your GPA. You must pass 75% of the classes that you start at the beginning of the semester. And you have to get a degree within 150% of the published length of the program. I know when I first started school in the old days, that some students would be lifetime students. They would stay in school and stay in school and stay in school. The federal government now has a regulation that after about 6.5 years, they're going to say, you need to finish up your degree or we're not going to give you any loans or grants anymore. You have to finish your degree. Institutional aid, which George Washington is very large, but at some state schools, it's not as large. Institutional aid, you have to stay full-time every semester. And new freshmen, the biggest concern I have with new freshmen is they say, I don't like this class. Then I always say, sign up for 15, drop the one class you don't like, and you'll still be 12 hours because if you, each class being 3 credits. But if you drop below 12 hours, then all of a sudden any grants that are based upon full-time enrollment automatically go away. So to let you know, we are really big on letting students knowing that they want to say full-time. A student's aid index is called a student aid index, determines a methodology called looking at need or need analysis. With need analysis, it determines a thing called the federal methodology, and that's from the FAFSA. F for federal, F for free. The free application for financial aid is free. Do not pay anyone to help you fill out that free application form. Some parents say that they pay their tax consultant to do it. It's a free form. The learning guide is easy. Many colleges, I know probably last year, I probably talked to 8 to 10,000 new freshman families who had never filled out a financial aid form before. And we walked them through things like where do investments go, et cetera, across the board. And that's what a lot of high school counselors will do is they'll talk with the FAFSA as well. They're just lots of questions. And I always tell students when it gets complicated, I am not a tax consultant. I can't tell you, I've seen 6,000 taxes and I know what lots of people did, but I'm not going to consult you on your piece of land that you own in California worth $1.1 million. That's between you and your investment person to decide. And schools use institutional methodology. Private schools like George Washington use that. And that's why we need the CSS profile. And I will talk about that in great length because I'm a fan of the CSS profile as opposed to the FAFSA, because the FAFSA usually pretty much says, how much did you make? How much is in your family? How much is in your savings and checking account? And here's your family contribution. I think the institutional methodology or the CSS profile looks at, do you own a home? How much do you own a home? How much do you have debt on the home? Do you own a business? How much do you still owe on the business? It looks at retirement, which is not countable. It looks at things like a person's second home or beach home, because those are considered assets that many families don't have. And the CSS picks that up. We also use that CSS profile to award every scholarship at the university at our school. The free application for financial aid, I said, is operable because the word is free. Don't pay for anyone to go. You will get people saying, if you give us $500, we'll let you apply to a scholarship. That's a scam, because what they're doing is they're getting all those people to give them $500. They give one scholarship out to one person. And then what happens is you've just lost $500 if you don't win that particular scholarship. There are thousands and thousands of scholarships out there. It looks at asset and income information. For a lot of the FAFSA data, it also says we collect things like, what high school did you come to? Are you the first generation in your family to go to college? It is looking at, what state were you born in? It's available and supposed to be available on October 1st of each year. But this year, as I have heard, December 1 as the date is going to be open nationwide to people across the board. I gave you the most up-to-date FAFSA application. Right now, the 2025-26 FAFSA says it's coming. That will open up online on December 1st. And it does walk you through step by step. Student aid index formerly used to be called the expected family contribution. And the reason that changed was because the family said, oh, I only need to pay $107 because that's what my expected family contribution is. And that is not. It's an awarding category. The lower the number, the better the financial aid package is for a particular student. For this coming year and last year, it can go as low as negative 1,500. And what happens is some schools like ours, if you are a negative 1,500, we cover the cost of tuition, room, and meal plan for all students that had a negative 1,500 that got accepted at our school. That was an $88,320 award, to let you know it's a private school. Income protection allowance increases benefits, and states with larger taxes like California or New York, it was negative for some of those just because the state taxes are high. But I'll talk about the appeal process in a second and how that's successful in negotiating. Remember, the FAFSA is just one moment of your life. It's like a SAT score. It's one moment of a test that you take. It does not measure how great of a student you're going to be. It measures how good you are at taking that particular test. Parent of record is a big issue this year because previous FAFSAs used to say, who's the custodial parent, which means which student lived with the parent the most, more than 50% of the time, and use that parent. Now the requirement is which parent contributed the most in the most recent tax year. For example, for students starting in school in 2025, the parent of record is the parent who contributed the most financially in 2023. And a lot of non-custodial and custodial parents say, well, we have an agreement, we have a judicial agreement, we have this agreement or that agreement. I'm still telling you that the federal government is saying who provided the most. If it's equal, and in some cases it is, it's equal. Sometimes the agreement will say 1 year parent one gets them, second year parent two gets them across the board. But in separations and divorces, the federal government also required this year, you used to have to mail in taxes, which means at a school, a large school, when I went to Michigan State, there were 66,000 families there. We got 66,000 tax returns. Now the federal government automatically sends it from the IRS. You have to agree to do that on your FAFSA. If you do not agree to have the federal government send your tax information, you get zero financial aid from the federal government. So I'm telling you, save yourself a lot. The federal government will send a sheet that says these families have filed taxes, here's their adjusted gross income, etc. And the FAFSA does walk you through to help determine which parent is your parent of record. Now, the College Scholarship Service, which is used by a lot of schools, especially private schools, is a supplementary application that's required by private schools like GW. It collects more in-depth income and asset information. It also allows the parent to accept or not accept the non-custodial parent profile. In some cases, the non-custodial parent is unknown. We don't know where the mother or the father is or located. It's required for all first-time students one time, and that CSS profile is provided during the freshman year. Why does a CSS need it? A family needs to complete this profile in addition to the FAFSA because it provides a more definite picture or detailed picture of a family's financial situation. It allows the school to award their institutional aid beyond the FAFSA's federal aid. Unlike the FAFSA, it asks for more depth information like what's the family's finances? What's investments look like? How much do you have in home equity? How much business income you have. This year or the year after COVID, I saw a lot of negative business income. I would have never caught that on the FAFSA, but the CSS file told me this business was negative $40,000 in the hole. So during COVID, that actually came to the advantage of the family because they had less income than they did the year before. Many colleges use this to determine eligibility for their own school scholarships, and I will share with you that's exactly what many private schools do, like George Washington as well. Other financial options, the largest lender of outside scholarships this year was churches. Churches gave more scholarships, love offerings. Being a Baptist minister son myself, I will tell you that churches say, here's $500, here's $1,000, here's $50. Congregations would give money. Churches, huge. Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, women's organizations, PTAs, etc., etc., etc. It goes on and on forever. I know that for some students and in my family, probably for every 10 scholarships I applied for, I got one of them. So when I went out of state to school, I went with almost 10 scholarships, but it probably took me 100 scholarship applications to get there. And I would say, oh, it's only $1,000. Well, guess what? That bought me my books for a semester. Or it was only, $200. That's okay. I'm taking anything they want to give me because it helps cut down the cost of having to borrow student loans or parent loans. Now, payment plan wise, some families will say, well, we don't know how to take care of the balance once the financial aid's been done. Schools offer parent payment plans, which allow students to be able to make payments at schools, which is a fourth for now, and then a quarter payment each semester for each term. Parent Plus loans are also available, but you have to fill out the FAFSA form in order to do the Parent Plus loans. And private loans are out there, but let me give you a caution about loans. As a counselor for 25 years, loans are the very last thing I award. Only reason being is I don't want to have a child be graduating and owe $38,000 of loan debt. Because if they go to master's programs or PhD programs, they're going to get their loan debt there anyway. I just don't want them to have it in their freshman year. So we're going to be looking at any kinds of things we can do to help families across the board about private loans. Appeals are something that most schools are now starting to look at, especially during COVID. This is where you think the FAFSA does not measure your family's true identity of financial situation. It looks for things like loss of employment, reduced salary and wages, medical expenses, uninsured funeral expenses, catastrophic. My friends in Florida use this one, 2 hurricanes back to back, and the damage that it caused the family allowed families that were from Florida at our school to be able to appeal because the family was now having to spend 40 or more $1,000 in order to save the home that they actually lived in. Recent marital status changes. You can appeal things like the non-custodial parent, as I said earlier, being available and not being available. And you can also, as I said, appeal cost of attendance issues across the board. The schools look at those appeals after you've been awarded financial aid, and then they go back and add to your financial aid based upon that information across the board. Okay, that's 101. I know that's quick. and easy, but I'm definitely ready for some questions if anyone has any questions. Don't be afraid. No question is silly.
So the information you just shared is from all, it works for all FAFSA and not just for George Washington, am I correct?
No, sir. We don't have an individual FAFSA. The FAFSA works for all FAFSAs across the country.
Thank you for clarifying.
I have no problem.
So Tony, uh, a few questions that come up pretty regularly in our office. One is, how do I know which schools require both the FAFSA and the profile? Because some schools don't take the profile, right?
Well, they don't. And what's going to happen is if you look at when you get offered admissions, one of the checklists is going to be financial aid. The schools should predominantly put on their financial aid on their website, we require the FAFSA. Ours says we require the FAFSA and the CSS profile. You will find that private schools require both. You will find that state schools usually provide or request just the FAFSA. The schools should say that. I do know our admissions homepage says the same thing. So therefore in doing it, and then outright ask, do you require any other supplementary forms? I know that at Virginia Tech, they had a private form for their general scholarship application, where at George Washington, when you get accepted, you immediately go into the scholarship portal, which means they automatically register for you. Some schools say, no, it's a separate application. Those are things that new parents definitely want to ask is, do you have any supplemental pages or information that we need to do? They also remind you during orientation that that's something that you want to do as well. So.
Someone in the chats asked if they really heard you say that the FAFSA is easy enough to fill out without paying for assistance.
It is. I will tell you that I can help a family sit in front of me if they've got their taxes, fill out a FAFSA in less than 20 minutes. If you pay someone, the last cost that their accountant charged them was $150. And that's why the operative word is free. High school counselors have gotten, I don't know if Amelia, if you are able to help, but some schools say, oh, we don't have enough staff to do that. But I will tell you that colleges, community colleges, I have helped lots of families that don't come to GW that have a child at our school, but then their other children are going to other schools. And they said, well, you've helped us. Let's talk about my other two students at other universities. And I do say, well, let's just fill out the FAFSA. You've got to do one for every child, for every school that they're going to, because if the school's not listed on the financial aid form, for example, and that's why some students will say, well, I'm going to list 20 schools. I caution them to say, if it only takes 10, then you're going to have to keep taking off and putting on a school because I can't get your data unless our school is listed as one of your choices across the board.
Right.
But no, it really is. I will tell you that's something that here's this number. It says go to line 38 on your taxes, put that number in, it's done, do that. If you don't know an answer or you say, I don't have any of that, put 0. Don't leave anything blank because they will assume if you left something blank that you're going back to fill it in later. The biggest mistake I've found in 25 years is that families leave it blank and it comes back as no family contribution or student aid index because it's thinking, well, you didn't fill in an answer. So we assume you meant to go back and put farmland when you don't have a farm.
A couple other questions people have asked. One is about why some public universities also ask for the CSS profile.
They do that because it's a way to manage their scholarship funds. Many times if I'm doing scholarships, and I'll give you a perfect example, I wasn't joking when I said I had a family who had land, $1.3 million in California, which of course didn't make it under investments on their FAFSA. It did on their CSS. And I said, what's it for? And he said, well, it's our rainy day land. And I said, well, then it's pouring because you should sell some of that land to pay for college for your 3 students. Because they were trying to not let anyone know that they had this thing of value that none of your other families on this call had. And so therefore the CSS profile, you're starting to see public schools ask for it to be good stewards of their scholarship management.
And then a question, can you give some more information about what are considered assets for the FAFSA?
Well, I've seen asset. What's countable on assets? I definitely have seen to the point where parents have put the 529 plans under the student's name. and then all of a sudden they turn 18 and that counts in this on the student's FAFSA, it counts 100% against the student. So it's the wrong place for it to be. Before they turn 18, you need to put that under a parent, because we know if you have 3 children, that means that 529 plan could be shared across the board for all 3 children. And if it is, and you just put, okay, we have $100,000 in that plan. If you came to our school, they would say, well, guess what? You're gonna have to spend that for 1 child, because unless you have 3 separate 529s, which many families do, for each child, saying John Doe and this student, because they're able to break them up that way. Other assets they're looking at, stocks and bonds or investments. It's the interest earned off those stocks and bonds that is countable. Retirement plans are not countable unless you actually cash them in. If you cash them in and don't roll them over, then that cash does inflate your income for that first year. So many times people have to say, I left my job, I got a payout, it was this much money. During COVID, we saw a lot of that happen, where people said, I cashed in $50,000 on retirement for my family to survive during the 2 years of COVID. So that year they had to say, I'm overinflated by $50,000. Not going to happen again. They'll also get an inheritance, and that inheritance will come back and say, here you go, here's 100,000. They'll say, what did you use it for? And they'll say, I paid off all my bills. Well, that makes sense. I understand that, but you're gonna have to appeal to help the appeal committee understand. I use that as opposed to I bought a new car and I bought a new boat. They're gonna say, well, those were life decisions. You should have been thinking about that money is countable for your child going to college as well.
How is the CSS also easy enough to fill out without paying for assistance?
I think so. And what happens is there's a lot of, and all my financial aid planning friends, because I have a financial advisor as well. And what's going to happen is I would never pay them to do something that a college is comfortable helping you advise. Now, what happens when you start saying, hey, I've got $1 million here and I'm moving this to this and this to that, I'm going to refer you to a financial advisor, because I am not one to say, well, you told me to move it there. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to refer you to an advisor. I find that the FAFSA we can do in 15 or 20 minutes over the telephone with a family. The CSS profile takes a little bit longer, because the questions are, what's the home debt? What's the home equity? What's the land value? What medical expenses are you covering? What investments do you have? The stock market goes all over the place. Some being international stocks as well as national stocks. There are periods of time that the value is wiped right off the plate. And then the next month, they've got a surplus of value, just because that's just how the stock market works. When you're filling out the CSS profile, I'll tell families, when it goes, what do you have in your savings and checking account? It should say, what do you typically keep in your checking account after you have paid your monthly bills? I'm not asking you to look in your account right now. It's payday. You have this huge check sitting in your account, pay your mortgage, pay your bills, pay your expenses, pay your electric, etc. What do you typically have left over that you carry forward? And someone will say, well, it's $190,000. And I said, okay, that's going to count against you. So therefore, in doing that, those are the kinds of things on the CSS profile, you're probably looking at 30 minutes. Every college that I've been working at, I have spent many, many hours on the phone helping families. I would not pay for a service at all, because when they do say they pay for the service, they said, what are you really getting? And if there's a mistake, they're going to say, you already paid me. I mean, what can you do if it's wrong? The schools will help you. One good thing about it is the schools can make corrections on your FAFSA as well as your CSS profile. Your financial planner cannot do that. Your investor cannot do that. The schools can.
Okay,
You prove to us that that number was a mistake, we can fix it.
that's great. A couple more questions. So if parents are divorced, do both parents need to complete the FAFSA? And could you also re-explain the new rule that you
Yeah,
mentioned earlier about the parents?
on the divorced family, the rule is the parent that provided the most financial aid assistance for the student, in this particular case for 2025, it will be 2023. The parent that provided the most financial, not the custodial parent, would be the parent that would fill out the FAFSA. The other parent would be the non-custodial parent, and that non-custodial parent's income is collected. It's collected on the form called the non-custodial, part of the CSS profile, but it's just that parent's tax information, and they stay separate. When I'm talking to a divorced or separated family, the mom and the dad do not know each other's tax information. What I'm doing is I'm gathering them separately, but then we're coming up with one student aid index for the student based upon that. Some situations are court ordered that they say it must be split 50-50, and I'm not going to I just need a copy of the court order and we go from there.
But for,
Some of
so for profile, you would need potentially need the non-custodial report, but for FAFSA, it would just be one parent who has to complete it, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Only one parent has to complete it. And according to the regulation, it says the parent that provided the most financial support, in this case for 2025, we're always 2 years behind. Families that don't know this, we used to be 1 year behind, and many families had filed extensions or whatever happened. So the federal government decided to go back 2 years because we didn't find that a lot of people had not completed their taxes 2 years ago.
Oh.
I have one family hadn't done them in the past 5 years, and that was a whole different issue. That wasn't for me. That's between them and their IRS. So
the IRS. Along those lines, does either the FAFSA or the CSS profile take into consideration if someone is a widow?
it does. What happens is when a person's passed away, the that becomes an appeal for us, a very easy appeal. It is saying, hey, my spouse has passed away. So let's say the spouse was the husband and he made $200,000 and he was a physician and he made $200,000, and the widow was a stay-at-home mom and she just has the family. With a copy of that appeal plus a copy of the death certificate, we automatically wipe away that parent's information and we would revise the FAFSA to show the true income is based upon the living
Right,
parent.
right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Another question sort of related, I think, to what you were talking about in terms of the 2-year difference, but do FAFSAs and the profile take into consideration the difference between active jobs and jobs that you might not be working anymore but had in the past?
It is only looking for income earned.
Right.
It doesn't really care about the job. It's saying in 2023, if you received a W-2 or a 1099, or in one case where a housekeeper was getting paid under the table, she still had to come up with an amount that she was getting and putting that on as cash handed directly to her. It's only looking for income earned. And so we will ask for things like 1099s, W-2s for those jobs. It's not looking at what type of job you have or what you're doing, is just earned income for that year.
So let's say in 2022, you made significantly more than you made this year, but the financial aid forms you submit are reflecting that earlier higher income. What
Then you
should,
would be a perfect family for an appeal to basically say the current year's FAFSA does not truly reflect our situation, and here's why. I worked for the airline industry. During COVID, I was laid off. Travel was down. I lost my job after 25 years. I got a balloon payment of my retirement. It came at this dollar amount. It's done. I'm now getting unemployment. Here's what it is. We would calculate the unemployment, the rate now, deduct what the original income was, and rework the financial aid based upon that new information.
yeah.
It's all about it's all about documentation.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example too. I've seen many families go from 4, and during COVID, all of a sudden grandma moves in or dad moves in, or a family member passed away, and that you've got 2 extra people in your family now. Very common. It just has to show, are you claiming them on taxes? Are you supporting them at least 50%? And you are, then therefore the income can go up based upon the fact that I know now I'm seeing a whole lot more grandparents, mom, grandfather, or grandmother moving in with one of their children and being
Yeah.
part of that household and them taken care of. As
Yeah.
opposed to putting them into nursing care, they're putting them into part of their household and taking care of at least 50% of what is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question about divorced parents. We actually get this quite a bit. So it has to do with if the non-custodial parent, I guess for the profile for FAFSA, the question is about if the second parent isn't cooperative or isn't compliant in terms of providing child support. what do you do with that, with the FAFSA?
Well,
What do you do with
Well,
that?
a lot of times when we have that, we usually have documentation of the fact that that is not happening. It'll either be through a court system or to be to the point that the person's in arrears and owes this much in child support. Many cases and times it's just the person, and I'll give you an example, a very bad one, but I'm going to give you one. In Virginia, the rivalry between Virginia Tech and Virginia is enormous. So therefore, the father said, if you go to Virginia Tech, I'm not paying a penny for college because I hate the school. That's how much I hate it. That appeal was denied because that father can't, well, he can hate the school that much, but he can't deny it just because the student didn't go to his alma mater. So that's a denial automatically across the board. The ones we see are parent or student that has no contact. There's been abuse issues. The
Yeah.
other parent is not available or cannot be found. There's been no contact. It requires a non-custodial cover sheet. It requires a letter from the family saying, why can this not be done? And then it's a support letter from someone like a minister or high school guidance counselor that said, I have worked with Johnny for the last 5 years. And I have never seen the other parent. They have never paid anything or come to any school functions. So therefore, we're going to document, we would like you to waive the non-custodial information. And 90% of those at our school are approved because those letters are touching, they're sad, and just outright. But the one that said, if you don't go to my alma mater, then I'm not going to pay. That was a very easy no. Good try, but that's not going to work. So the student
Yeah.
ended up going to community college, and they had to work it out among themselves. So
Yeah. Okay, so many questions, Tony. The
that's
next one
okay.
is, if you qualify for the maximum Pell Grant, does your college or university normally make up the financial aid that you need?
If you qualify for Pell Grant, and that for this year was a negative 1,500 student aid index, schools will normally cover tuition, room, and meal plan because now that's a school that can afford it. A
Yeah.
state supported school or community college could say, we might help you with tuition, but we can't handle anything else because we don't have the state funds for it. Private schools like George Washington are lucky that we set an agreement that if you come in as Pell eligible, negative 1,500, which means that's the lowest you can go category wise on paper, 5 in the family, doing the best you can, et cetera, et cetera. Then all of a sudden that family, we cover tuition, room, and meal plan.
Yeah.
And we say that right up front. That's a huge recruiting tool. If our school costs 92,000, we're paying 88,000 of that, then you're going to say, hey, that's a great way for me to look at a school I didn't think I could go to because the fact that you do that. Some state schools are because of the funding from the state, Commonwealth of Virginia, for example, Commonwealth of Alabama, depends on how much money they can put into public schools across the board.
Right.
And you have to ask that question right up front. If I'm fully Pell eligible, because there's things like SEOG, federal work study, subsidized and unsubsidized loans, university alumni grant or states grants or whatever from your colleges that can go toward covering. It can be a combination of lots of awards. It's just covering tuition, room, and meal plan.
Yeah, I find that families are sometimes surprised to learn that private schools that look more expensive on paper can sometimes end up being more affordable for certain families than their in-state institutions.
They are, and it's looking at them to the point too. It's the major. I mean, like if you go into engineering, those books and things are going to cost a whole lot more money. If you go into art, I've noticed that the art students that are at our school, art supplies cost a whole lot more than the budget. So that they have to say, if you're going to, art school, it requires different kinds of things. Where in the engineering requires lots of design books and lots of CAD books, and lots of things. Where if you go to our medical school or law school, those require different books altogether. So yes, each family uniquely different. But yes, I've found families shocked by, oh my God, I never thought I could come here because my family income last year was 40,000. And you're telling me I can go to, 5 in the family, 2 in college. I can come to your school and have my room and board tuition and meal plan taken care of. So
Yeah. You mentioned private and Parent Plus loans earlier.
right.
What are your thoughts or opinions on subsidized and unsubsidized federal loans for students?
Okay. And that's a great question. And I'm going to answer it this way. I found even with my children that I said subsidized loans was something I wanted them to take because I wanted them to realize, like any parent, children don't understand the cost of things like this. So therefore they became invested in taking out their subsidized loan. Subsidized, no interest while you're in school, as long as you're full-time enrolled, you're there. And what they would do is they would win a scholarship, get a really good grade and win a scholarship. They would pay off their freshman loan, then their sophomore loan. And so luckily with my three, all of them graduate with no loan debt. Now that was an option they chose to do because I'm just saying the loans were there. It did help them build credit. They did not take the unsubsidized loan because if you take that 2,000, that unsubsidized loan accrues interest the moment you borrow it. So the first semester you borrowed $1,000, that $1,000 then earns interest for 4 years because you borrowed it during your freshman year, first semester. I tell students and parents like, why don't my students to have loans? They'll take out the Parent Plus loan. Well, the Parent Plus loan, if you're looking at the Parent Plus loan, the current interest rate on the Parent Plus loan is fixed, but it's at 9%. And they're saying the parents are saying, well, I'm going to borrow the loan and just hand the refund to the student. That's why students need to set up direct deposit with parents being able to see what they get. Because if a student, like I just awarded $10,000 scholarships yesterday, and the students are like, I'm going to win this, but just don't tell my parents. And I said, well, it's going to show up if you've given your parents access. And let's talk about the Buckley Amendment for a second. Once the student starts school at 18, that student has to give you access to talk about their financial aid. If you don't have that, especially in divorce and separations, I don't know who on the phone is Jane or John Doe. And I need to say, what is your name? Has your child given you access? Some students say no. And they say no, the parents think, well, I'm not paying anything because I need to know that but they could say, you can have access to my finances, but not my grades. And all particular cases, many students just give access to everything. Obviously, in case of an emergency, we're going to call the parent regardless across the board. But just to let you know, allowing your family to do that, because a student starts school, gets in and doesn't realize that bill is going to be billed 5 times each semester. And now we're getting ready to sign up for spring. And they're like, I haven't paid my fall bill yet. And I'm like, well, you've got 1 week to pay it or you can't register for next semester. So um, I do firm believe that the student should be invested in their subsidized loans. They don't have to always take them, but the unsubsidized, you should stay clear of those because those are interest bearing, unless you outright say, I need that to pay for school.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, if you are out there on Zoom and you have remaining questions, go ahead and pop those in. We've got 2 more sort of in the queue. The next question is, our student is applying to out-of-state schools. Can you talk about whether out-of-state schools give consideration to additional costs and
That-
financial aid?
They do. For example, like private schools at our school, in-state and out-of-state students pay exactly the same.
Right.
Now, I know when I went to Michigan State, I had to pay the in-state cost was, and I'll say that time was 30,000 and the out-of-state cost was 60,000. So I had to come up with a $30,000 difference. So I got an athletic scholarship. And then also I had to take merit, as I told you, merit scholarship with me. That's the only way I could have been able to afford an out-of-state school.
Right.
Obviously too, if you look at out-of-state would charge more because if you're a state supported school, the state is supposed to take 60% of their in-state students and 40% of their out-of-state. So there's a lot of competition for out-of-state students to come to their schools. I always tell students when you apply to schools, I saw the record was yesterday where a person had 30 schools they had applied to. And I said, that's expensive because I will tell you to apply to 30 schools. But what you should have is you should have at least 5 where you've narrowed it down to say, this is my go-to school. This is my safety school. And these are the other 3 that I could go to if I wanted. Get a financial aid package, make your decision by May 1st, lay all the financial aid packages down and be very careful about a thing called front loading. Front loading means a school gives you all your financial aid freshman year.
Yeah.
Then you get no financial aid in your sophomore, junior, or senior year. And right up front, I will say, I need it in writing. If you're getting an athletic aid or a scholarship, if it sounds too good to be true, put it in writing. If I don't see it in writing, it doesn't mean anything. And I told, hey, I know you had a conversation at the Washington Monument with your coach, but I have no idea what either one of you said. And so therefore it's just you said, they said, get it in writing.
Yeah.
Because if you get it in writing, then I have something to go through about cost of attendance, athletic awards and things like that across the board.
Yeah, we often share with our families, there's sort of some worksheets you can use to put all your financial aid offers sort of on one page or in one
Correct.
spreadsheet and look at the bottom line. So we'll be sending some of those tools out.
Right.
Another question is, how important is applying early to getting aid?
Applying early decision would be if that's your school you want to go to, remember, early decision is binding. So if you go to a school like George Washington and you say, I'm doing early decision, that means I am not applying to any other school. And what happens if that's not your school, then what happens is all of a sudden you don't get in, then you're playing catch up across the board. Early decision, I've seen athletes do that because they get in because they're a great student and a great athlete and they get in and they're good and ready to go. I usually share with most students, they probably should be looking at regular decision, which is only 3 weeks after that. Regular decision because it puts them in the pool to be able to look at all the cost of the school across the board and go through regularly. Early decision says I'm the best and brightest. Last year, based upon early decision, I saw 3.8s or higher. I saw them with at least 8 to 10 AP classes. I saw them with stellar SATs and wonderful essays that they had just had great essays across the board.
So on the early decision topic at GW, for example, students could still apply for need-based aid at the time they're submitting their early decision application.
And what they're going to do is we're
package.
going to get a package to them probably in middle of January, and that student will have athletic aid, merit aid, need-based aid, FAFSA aid, and a true financial aid package, and then a short 2-week window to make a decision.
Yeah. And then what
And
about on the FAFSA front? Is there an advantage to completing the FAFSA like early, like as soon as it releases? Is there like a
it is
balance phase?
for early decision, we're telling students there is, and obviously sadly until December 1st, you can't do that. So all these November early decision students that are applying can't do that because it's not available to them yet. We know that, so we're not going to penalize the student across the board. But the early decision, the thing about it, there's a thing, early decision 1, early decision 2, and regular decision. The ones that really want to go saying, I don't want to look at any of the school, GW is a school for me. Now, what some families will do is they'll do early decision and not tell you. They also have 3 other backup schools, and they are doing that. If the school finds that out, they do have a right to cancel your early decision application.
Yeah.
Because you're saying I'm committing to your school and no one else. But I would hate to make that decision as early decision, not get in, and then say, now I'm playing catch up.
Yeah. So let's say you're applying regular decision. Is it important to submit the FAFSA as soon after December 1st as possible? What happens if you wait and submit it in like February or March?
Well, we tell all our returning students that March 1 is the deadline for you to get the best financial aid package for the coming year.
Okay.
I would use that for new students as well. By March 1st, you should have your FAFSA in.
Okay.
Now, some parents will say, especially in separations and divorces, I thought you did it. No, I thought you did it. Did you do it? Did you do that? The student needs to be helpful to make sure that gets in on time. But March 1st is a great date to keep in your mind. If December 1 comes out, I'll caution you. If millions of people hit December 1's FAFSA, it's going to slow down or stop. And so therefore, I would have to tell you that during Christmas and during the holiday would be a good time to file your FAFSA. You've got till New Year's to get it there. So.
Right. And then regarding early decision, isn't that predicated on being able to financially afford the tuition? How would you know, if your child really wants to do early decision and you think you might qualify for some aid, how could you gather information to help you decide whether
there's a
it
wonderful
might be
thing called
affordable for you?
There's a thing called the net price calculator. Every school has them. If you go like at George Washington or any other school, it allows you on their admissions page to say, put in your data for 2023, run it, and it will tell you what your student aid index is. If your student aid index is anywhere from 40,000 or below, you're going to get a pretty decent financial aid package at a private school.
Yeah.
If you're going to a public school, you would want to probably be 25,000 or below.
Yeah.
The closer you're to 0, the better your financial aid package is going to be. If your package comes out and says your family contribution is 100,000, then all you're going to get is loans and you're not going to get offered anything else.
Yeah.
A lot of people use net price calculators in order to determine where you might find in that bend across the board. So
Yeah, we really try to encourage families to check those as students are putting their college list together, just to try to get some some semblance of what things might look like for your family,
sure,
because it can vary so much.
sure.
And I would say that's another question we get all the time is like, how do I, or even a presumption like we're not going to qualify for aid. Why
That's
would
the other thing.
we try?
Money should not be the reason you don't go to college. It's because you go to the point to say, I make too much. Well, if you
Mhm.
make 200,000, you have 5 in your family and 3 in college, you're cash poor when it
Yeah,
comes to college. So therefore, don't talk yourself out of, because when I award scholarships and I don't see a FAFSA, guess what that sends to me? I'm not interested in financial aid, so I'm just not going to spend time filling out the form. It's
yeah,
free. Fill out the form so you show up in my pool. If you don't show up in the pool, I'm going to say, well, you didn't even let me know you want financial aid. So you have to give me something.
yeah.
And the FAFSA is the one that you should fill out. Give me the FAFSA.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And then I think our last question is if a family wants to file a financial aid appeal, do they do that with FAFSA or do they go directly
No,
to the college
don't
board?
ever do it to FAFSA, because FAFSA is going to say we don't do anything with it because they're handling the whole country. The FAFSA appeal should go to your top 2 or 3 schools that you're applying to. Now, you shouldn't send it before you get a financial aid award, because Amelia, if I gave you an award and I offered you 50, and then I see Stephen Miller and his family are applying for one, that's great. But what they need to do is they need to wait till they get awarded. And once
Right.
they get awarded, I can say, okay, fine, we just gave the Miller family another $10,000.
Yeah.
And so therefore the appeal allowed us to do that. You can't say before I've even awarded you, I want to do an appeal. There's nothing to appeal. You haven't seen your financial aid package yet.
Yeah, exactly. And then do you negotiate financial aid packages?
Do not. I will stop that right now. You can say
Yes.
Florida State gave us this, Alabama gave us this, and you gave us this. Will you match their award? Where their award could be the Alabama President's Scholarship. We don't have that. We're
Yeah.
not going to compete with that. We don't have that funding for that particular award. In Georgia, they have a thing called the Hope Scholarship. It's in Georgia. It doesn't mean you get to come to Virginia and use it. It's Georgia. And so therefore we do not. We've awarded you the best we can with your appeal and your FAFSA and your CSS. That's the best offer we can do. We will not negotiate a package.
Yeah. That's always been my understanding, but I love to hear it
Well, it's
straight
just
from
that the
you.
important thing too is each family is unique. All these families on the call, the 42 families on this call, you'd
Yeah.
have to say 42 different stories, 42 different financial aid situations, and each family has their own story.
Yeah.
And so what happens is school should know as much of that story as possible while we do your financial aid package.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So we're coming up on the end of our time. A couple quick things to add. I think if your child goes to any of the 3 schools that are part of this call, you have responsive college advising and college counseling offices with a lot of experience with financial aid. We certainly don't know the answer to every question, but we can often help you navigate the FAFSA or the CSS profile. And I know that's true for all 3 of our schools. We can also often help you figure out who you need to talk to at an individual college or university if you have questions that we can't help you answer. So always reach out to us and let us try to help you out. And then in many schools, in my experience, you're able to get in touch with a financial aid officer, especially once the student has been admitted and you've submitted your materials, if you need more in-depth help with things. So
And,
any
and I'll
closing?
go here as
Yeah,
well. My email is up on there. Many
great.
parents will say, "Hey, I went to a presentation. You asked some questions. I have a follow-up question." I'm
Yeah,
totally willing for them to do that as well.
awesome. So hopefully everybody can nab that email address.
And if
Thank
you
you.
want to share the presentation, please feel free to do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for spending this time with us
Okay,
and for that offer to allow folks to follow up with you. This has been super helpful. So we
okay,
really
sure.
appreciate you
Thank you.
and appreciate the time you've given us. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
you're welcome.
All right, take care.